In Peter Parker, The Spectacular Spiderman issue number 310 by the legendary Chip Zdarsky, we get to see one of the saddest, most human moments Spider-Man has ever had. The issue starts with people being interviewed and talking about Spider-Man, asking what they think of him. The first man calls Spider-Man a weirdo. The next person heard that he was a teenager and thinks that he's too old to still be wearing a costume and doing his thing. The next person loves Spider-Man, mentioning how he lifted her car when it broke down to help her out. He denies the money she offers, but actually takes change because his arms were tired and he wanted to use the subway. The next dude hates Spider-Man, mentioning how a vampire hit his car one time and then ran away, and how he'll see Spider-Man in court. The last lady simply mentions when asked that Spider-Man is amazing. It then cuts to Peter patrolling the city, mentioning how he'll do one more go-around before going to bed and calling it a night. As he jokes around with why criminals fight at night, he notices police chasing down some goons and decides to join in. The thugs are running away, with one of them pointing a gun at the cop, with Spidey stopping him. Spider-Man stops the first two bad guys and chases the last one in the alleyway. Peter corners the last dude in the alley and jokes around with him until he realizes that he's just a kid. The kid starts panicking, stuttering his words, telling Spider-Man that the two goons ask him to be a lookout and tell Spider-Man that he won't ever do it again. When the cop enters the alley, he notices the kid is missing, with Spider-Man mentioning how he got away. We see, though, that Spider-Man hides the kid up on a building away from the cops. It then goes to more interviews about Spider-Man, going back to the last lady we saw, and it turns out that it's the mother of the kid Peter saved. She mentions how Spider-Man thought that he didn't need a record to set him straight, and mentions how her son, Kyle, got $50 from the two guys to be a lookout, and proceeds to say how thankful she is that Spider-Man brought him back to her. It then cuts to more interviews, this guy here calling Spider-Man a freak, but saying he has no room to judge. And then there's his dad and her daughter, with the daughter talking about a fight she thinks she saw Spider-Man in, but it turns out it was Daredevil. The next person talks about how Spider-Man tried to help her with the groceries using his webs to fix the broken bag, but his webbing took too long to dissolve, and her ice cream melted, which is pretty funny. The last dude just seems to have some sort of chip on his shoulder against him. The next panel shows that dude being rescued by Spider-Man from Venom and Scorpion. The next panel shows Spider-Man going there another day, rambling about whatever hot dog fact he's rambling about, annoying the guy. It's a really funny issue, really captures the essence of Peter. It then continues on with that interview, saying that since Spidey saved him from that event, he offered him free hot dogs for life, which Peter took, but he didn't realize that Spidey would actually go there every day and annoy him. The next person simply says he seems fine, but desperate. The next Karen says that she doesn't like Spider-Man, mentioning how masked men spying on citizens isn't the world they want to live in. The next person says that Spider-Man is beautifully selfless, mentioning how he could use his powers to make money, but instead chooses to help people, and she can tell he doesn't make much money because he eats hot dogs every day. The next person is Kyle's mother again, mentioning how after Spidey saved him, he's changed. With his dad in prison, things weren't easy for him, but after meeting Spider-Man, he's been kinder and getting better grades. The next page is one of my absolute favorites of any comic book. Kyle's mother gets dinner ready and calls for him to come eat. When she notices he isn't coming, she goes down to his room and notices him talking with someone. She opens the door and she sees Spider-Man tutoring Kyle on some math. She goes back into the hallway, smiling. Literally one of the best representations of Spider-Man. So simple, but captures his character perfectly. It then shows some more interviews, the first being a cop saying that Spider-Man's a joke, and how people like him are stuck with always doing the paperwork and testifying in court. The next person is Captain America. He mentions how he knows people are put off by his mask and his comedic sensibilities, but then goes on to say how in his opinion, Spider-Man's one of the greatest men he's ever known. Imagine Cap saying that about you. You've won life. The next panel is someone simply saying Spider-Man is bad. Kyle's mother then continues with her interview, talking about how Spider-Man helped her son and how she'll always feel indebted to him because of that, but then goes on to say that he didn't know that the two guys he worked with in the beginning got out on bail, and they thought the cops showing up was Kyle's fault. The next panel shows Spider-Man swinging over to Kyle's house, knocking on his window and trying to look for him. When that doesn't work, he rings the doorbell to the front door, but gets no answer. As he's about to leave, Kyle's mother opens the door. Spider-Man sees her, crying. She walks up to Spidey and falls into his arms. They both just stand there, trying to hold each other together. The next panel shows the two goons running off into a warehouse, hiding and being on alert. Spider-Man then gets in behind them. One of them notices, but it's obviously too late. Spider-Man jumps at them, taking them out. He webs them up on a building, with the cops pulling up to take them away. Peter's shown to be on top of the building, however, crying, heartbroken about what happened to Kyle. Knowing Peter, he likely felt some type of guilt about his death as well. Kyle's mother continues her interview, mentioning how at times it may be hard to look up and see this guy swinging and think of him as a person, but she mentions that she's seen and knows Spider-Man, and that he's just a guy who wants to help, going on about how he helped her and Kyle as much as he could. She ends with saying that Spider-Man saves people and expects nothing back in return, and that everyone should try and be like Spider-Man. It then shows someone editing her interview, which turns out to be the person behind a documentary, compiling all the interviews we've seen into it. He's kicked out of the editing suite by his friend, and as he's walking outside, he notices Spider-Man above him. Spider-Man then comes down and mentions how he's heard that he's making a documentary about him. The guy says he is, and mentions how he's been in film school for way too long and wanted to start with something big. Spider-Man tells him that's cool, but was wondering why he picked him out of all the heroes in New York, asking if he saved his life or something. The guy replies with saying not exactly, with the next panel showing him witnessing a fight between Spidey and Doc Ock a long time ago. It shows him getting filth all over him from a trash can from the fight. He mentions to Spidey how he was going on his first date that day, and how nervous he was. It then shows Spider-Man that day noticing his dirty clothes, and reaching into his backpack for new clothes he can wear, giving it to him as he swings away. The guy goes on to say to Spider-Man that day made him realize that he was clearly just another kid like he was, and him giving his clothes made him see that he was just a real person, just some guy. That stuck with him, which is why he made a documentary to see how everyone else perceives him. Spider-Man tells him he remembers that, and asks how the date went, with the guy telling him it didn't go well pretty much. Spider-Man then goes on to say that now that his curiosity is satisfied, and that's not a documentary about him being a menace, he's good to go, and says goodbye to the guy. The guy asks him to wait, however, and tells Spidey that he is now curious, and asks Spider-Man how he even found out about his documentary in the first place. The next and final shot shows that one of the last people he interviewed is Peter Parker. Peter is asked about what he thinks of Spider-Man, and says that he has a conflict of interests because of how he used to take pictures of him for the Daily Bugle, and how he helped him with his rent. He mentions how he repaid him by hiring him to be a bodyguard later on. He then mentions how Spider-Man is a good guy, mostly. He goes on to say how he tries to do the right thing, and that hopefully people see that, but that he's also human and makes mistakes, and that he can't save everyone. He then says how he thinks of the weight of it all, about how he keeps going, despite the failures, hoping, ultimately, that he's helping people. The story ends with Peter saying that when he thinks of Spider-Man, that no matter what, he's never going to stop trying.